Farshad, I think yes, thank you so much. Good afternoon and welcome everyone. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the inaugural session of the Melanotes Book Talk series, a new initiative designed to enhance scholarly engagement within the Middle East Librarian Associations, MELA, and to create a dedicated space for critical conversation around major works in Middle Eastern studies and Middle East librarianship. This book talk series spotlights books that have been reviewed in Melanotes, the flagship journal of the association, and it brings together authors and reviewers in a lively and thoughtful exchange. By doing so, we aim to foster deeper connections among MELA members, strengthen our scholarly community, and amplify the visibility of important new publications in the field. We are absolutely delighted to launch the series with today's event. Today, we will be discussing the newly translated Persian novel From the Moon to the Well as Mah Ta Chah by acclaimed Iranian author Hossein Atashparvar, translated into English by the distinguished scholar Dr. M.R. Ghanoonparvar and published by Mazda Publishers earlier this year. We are also joined by Mehrak Kamali, who reviewed the book in Melanotes and I will serve as the moderator for today's discussion. I'm Mahdi Genjavi, and scholar of history of education and knowledge with a deep interest in the history of Persian fiction, and currently teaching at the Faculty of Information at University of Toronto. Thank you for joining us online from different time zones, whether you're Central, Eastern, or Pacific time. We are thrilled to have you with us. The presentations today will be in English, except for the talk by Hossein Atashparvar, which, while in Persian, I have prepared a draft translation of it and will read to you. Before we begin the conversation, let me acknowledge the land on which I'm hosting this session today, Toronto, and then briefly introduce our distinguished guest. I wish to acknowledge this land. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to work and learn on this land. Starting with introducing Mr. Hossein Atashparvar. Hossein Atashparvar, born back in 1952, is a distinguished figure in contemporary Persian literature and a leading voice among the third generation of Iranian modern writers. He began publishing fiction in the early 1970s, and over the decades has garnered acclaim for his evocative storytelling and nuanced portrayals of Iranian life and identity. Atashparvar's short stories, Sorrow, 1985, and The Song of Rain, 1990, were landmark publications, appearing in prestigious literary magazines and cementing his reputation as a writer of depth and vision. His novel Bahar Street Was Blue was a finalist for the Distinctive Literature Award in 2005, while his celebrated short story collection Fish in the Wind, Mahi Dar Bad, earned the inaugural Simin Daneshvar Gold Plaque from the Literary Press in 2013. In 2018, his novel On Snow at 14 received an honorable mention from the Association for the Study of Distinctive Fiction, further solidifying his literary stature. Since 2006, Atashparvar has served as the editor of Neveshta, an influential literary magazine with over 56 issues to date, shaping contemporary literary discourse in Iran and beyond. He has also contributed to the development of Persian literature and fiction as a judge for the prestigious independent Mehrak Literary Prize since 2015. Atashparvar's work is marked by lyrical prose, a deep engagement with social and cultural themes, and a commitment to artistic integrity. He remains an essential voice in the ongoing evolution of modern Iranian literature. I think it would be good for me to stop here and introduce our two honorable guests after the presentation and talk by Mr. Atashparvar, and we will come back to that section later. آقای آتشپرور لطفاً بفرمایید، ما در خدمت شما هستیم.
سلام به همگی. جناب قانونپرور عزیز، آقای گنجوی عزیز، آقای کمالی و دیگر دوستان و شرکت کنندگان، صحبت‌های من درباره بیشتر شکل و ساخت داستان هست و آنچه که باید گفته باشم در داخل خود کتاب هست، بوده اینها هست. و اینجا فقط راجع به شکل و ساخت شکل کتاب در حقیقت یک بیت شعر هست، یک بیت شعر کلاسیک فارسی هست که مصرع اولش خیابان تهران، فضای بین خالی هست، اون فضای خالی خیابان کوهسنگی، از فلک تقیابان میره خیابان کوهسنگی، و بیت دومش در حقیقت مصرع دومش خیابان امام رضا قسمت دیگه. این خیابان در دو مقطع، یک خیابان در حقیقت دو تا اسم داره در دو مقطع تاریخی. خب یک مصرع اول که یک لنگه در باشه، در حقیقت ما درش باز میشه میره به طرف جنگ، و در مصرع دوم درش بسته میشه که در حقیقت تو کتاب توضیح داده میشه. فضای بین دو مصرع هم اون فضای خالی، خیابان‌های دیگر چیز کردم. این شکل داستان هست. اما رئال داستان یک حرکت واقعی داریم، یک حرکت واقعی که از میدان فردوسی شروع میشه. من با اون شخصیتی که بنگاهی هست در ماشین حرکت میکنیم، میرسیم یک مسیر دبرانی دور میزنیم و برمیگردیم سر جای اول. منتها در این مسیر من نویسنده یا من راوی در اونجا یک حرکت ذهنی هم دارم، یک فراشبک های ذهنی هم دارم که تو تصویر بعدی اگر میشه. بله، ببینید اینجا اون قسمت هایی که آبی هست، ضمن که من با بنگاهی هستم و در چیز داریم حرکت میکنیم، اونجا ذهن من پرش پیدا میکنه، میره یک سری وقایع دیگر به داستان وارد میکنه. مثل به عنوان مثال کشتن زنهای که قاتل زنهای زنجیره‌ای بود در اونجا میره تو اونجا در مجموع، و بقیه قسمت های دیگه که مثلا ذهن پرش میکنه میره فلک 3 اسفند روزنامه آفتاب شب، ذهن پرش میکنه میره میدان اعدام. اینا تو مسیر ما نیست، یعنی در مسیر رئال ما نیست، منتها ذهن میره، اینا در حواشی اون مسیر هست. و این درست مرکز شهره، یعنی این مسیری که ما داریم دور میزنیم مرکز شهر هست در مجموع هست. بعد یک مسیر دیگه ما داریم که چیز هست، آغاز خود داستان. این مسیر ذهنی که مشخص شد، تصویر بعد لطفاً بیاری. خب ببخشید که قبل اشتباه کردم. ببینید اینجا در حقیقت شروع داستان در خیابان تهران و خیابان امروزه که هر دو بین دو تا فلکه قرار میگیرن، یعنی بین فلکه آب و فلکه برق. قبلا اسمش بوده خیابان تهران، چون در حقیقت از تهران وارد میشن، این 80% کسانی که وارد مشهد میشن باید از این خیابان بگذرن، رفت آمد کنن، برن و بیان از خارج از غیر از مشهد. بعد این تا سال 57 تو اینها اسمش خیابان تهران بود، از 57 به بعد شد خیابان امام رضا. پس ما در حقیقت یک خیابان بین دو تا فلکه رو داریم میگیم اونجا، با دو تا نام دو تا مقطع بررسی میشه. خب اساس این داستان بر عادت شکنی هست، پارادوکس و استعاره است. عادت شکنی در خیابان که یکی از نمادهای جامعه مدرن شهری است در خیابانی که محل رفت آمد اتومبیل است، رود خروشانی از انسان جاری است. انسانهایی که با پای برهنه خونی سرخ بر مصرع اول میدوند، در مصرع آخر خالی از انسان است، با جای پای خونی به جا مانده بر آسفالت. در هجوم عکس سرهای بدون سر بر دیوار که سرخ به ما نگاه میکنند و ما خیابانی را در آن آشنایی زدایی شده در پارادوکس یک استعاره میبینیم. یعنی تمام اینا به یک استعاره تبدیل میشن. خیابانی که باید جایی در حقیقت اتومبیل باشه، ببینید که به چه بعضی در میاد، استفاده ابزاری ازش میشه. یک مسئله دیگه که اینجا مطرحه، که داستان بر اساس اون حرکت میکنه. مکان شخصیت هست در اینجا. خب مکان یعنی چی؟ یعنی در حقیقت جای پای انسان، جای پا. بعد میشه بیشتر داستان‌های معاصر ما انسان ما در داستان میبینیم. ما کمتر به مکان پرداخته میشه و اگر مکان هم بیاد به صورت درجه 2 و درجه 3 هست و به صورت بک‌گراند. من ندیدم که شخصیت داستانی در حقیقت مکان باشه. خب اگر کسانی که رمان خواندن ببینن که من در این کتاب دنبال یک خیابانی میگردم که سمبل شهرم باشه، میخوام به عنوان شخصیت انتخاب بکنم. و ما طبیعت کمتر توی چیز داریم، توی داستان نویسی داریم. جای پای ما در حقیقت، مکان در حقیقت از جای پای ما شروع میشه: اتاق، خانه، کوچه، خیابان، شهر، کشور و زمین. پل میدان. بسیاری از مکان‌های ما یک شخصیت هم. به عنوان مثال 33 پل یک شخصیتی که ما به اینا توجه نمی‌کنیم. میدان انقلاب 33 پل، میدان اعدام لاله‌زار، باغ خونی محمد آباد، قبرستان و همه اینا شخصیت دارن، هویتی که از انسان‌ها گرفته شدن. خب انسان میمیره ولی هویت خودش در اینا باقی میمونه. به عنوان مثلا 33 پل، خب مشخص نیست که کی بین هویتشون در اون ساخت دادن، به این پل دادن. اون کسانی که این ساختن وجود ندارن، منتها هویت اینها، فرهنگ اینها در اون پل باقی مونده در مجموع. خب. یکی از مهمترین ویژگی‌های سفرنامه ناصر خسرو، جدا از نثر درخشانی که سفرنامه ناصر خسرو داره، اینه که بوم داستانه. این کتاب در حقیقت ما شهرهایی که 1000 سال پیش ناصر خسرو رفته عبور کرده، اینا رو داریم میبینیم. الان انگار وقتی داریم میخوانیم با جزئی نگری رفته اینها رو چیکار کرده، اینها رو در حقیقت نشون داده. مثلا به عنوان مثال از فردوس وقتی نام میبره، میگه که 400 کارگاه زیر و بافی داشته و درختان پسته در اونجا هست و گویان که در تخارستان فقط پسته روید، ولی خب اینجا داشته. ببینید الان از اون 400 کارگاه زیر و بافی ما هیچی نداریم در اونجا در مجموع. خب اگر ناصر خسرو نرفته بود اینا رو، یا مثلا در لحاظا که داره میگه که گوشت گربه و گوشت سگ و اینا رو میفروختن و مردم برای اینکه بدانن به عنوان مثال که چه گوشتی میخرن، سر اینها، کله اینا هم اونجا بود. خب ما در اونجا داریم که تقریبا بحرین امروزی میشه. یا به عنوان مثال بصره وقتی به حمام میره، اونجا در 2 نوبت میره که اول با لباس کهنه میره و بعد که لباس نو میره و اون برخورده باش میشه در بصره. خب اینها با جزئیات داره میگه در مجموع. بعد این ما مقایسه میکنیم با سعدی. سعدی هم مکان داره، میگه مثلا در خندق طرابلس مرا گرفتن و با جهودان به کار گل داشتن، یا مثلا در سر در بیابان قدس نهادم و اینها، یا در جزیره کیش شبید. ببینید ما از جزیره کیش یا از خندق طرابلس یا بیابان قدس فقط اسم داریم، هویت نداریم. در اینجا مقایسه بین، ببینید مکان داستانی که ناصر خسرو وصف کرده با چیز داستان نویسی ما هم امروز همینه. یعنی با آوردن اسم ما نمیتونیم مکان یا شخصیت یا چیز بیم. گرچه که مکان هم شخصیت انسان کامل میکنه در مجموع و ما هیچ تصویری از جزیره کیش یا به عنوان مثال بیابان قدس در ذهن ما ساخته نمیشه. خب روایت و ساخت در محتاچا. در ماتاچا شهر یک متن است. نویسنده در جستجوی خیابانی است که سمبل شهرش باشد، اما با عبور از آنها تصویرهایی در ذهنش شکل میگیرد که خیابانها و مکانها میشود شخصیت داستان. در اصل نویسنده در این داستان دنبال هویت گمشده خود میگردد. ماهتاچا داستان بلندی است که از خرد روایت ها تشکیل شده. یک داستان پیوسته نیست، از خرد روایت ها تشکیل شده. خرد روایت های مستقل شکل گرفته است. خرد روایت هایی که در ساخت از قطعات رئالیستی به فرازهای سورئالیستی میرسد. این خرد روایت ها یک پوست پیازی یا دایره‌ای شکل، لایه لایه هر کدام
Seems Mr. Atashparvar's internet might have had some issue. This is not something that we that we usually tend to unfortunately expect when it comes to having sessions with colleagues in Iran. Gladly, we have a translation of his presentation. So while we are waiting for Hossein to see if he can join us back, let me read to you from what Mr. Atashparvar was covering in his talk. Form and structure are central to From Moon to the Well. In this work, we inhabit a city whose door opens and closes at a pivotal historical moment, war. The structure is built upon rupturing habits, embracing paradox, and using metaphor. This disruption of habits occurs in the street, an emblem of modern urban life. In a place meant for cars, a torrent of human bodies flows barefoot, bleeding. I often think of the whole story as a single verse, in which a street appears under two names in its two hemistaches. Tehran Street, later renamed Imam Reza Street. In the final hemistache, the street is deserted. Only bloody footprints remain on the asphalt. On the wall, images of decapitated heads stare at us in red. The street appears in two paradoxical, defamiliarized, metaphorical states. Mr. Atashparvar continues, in contemporary fiction, we often see people more than their footprints or the environments they inhabit. If places appear at all, it tends to remain a faint backdrop. But an earthly human cannot exist without place and its trace. Room, house, alley, street, city, country, and land. Many of our places are characters we overlook. انقلاب Square, 33 پل, اعدام Square, لاله‌زار, باغ خونی, Mohammadabad districts, cemeteries, each shaped by human identity. One of the most remarkable aspects of Nasser Khosrow's travelogue, beyond its eloquent prose, is its vivid sense of place. Locations appear so clearly that we feel we are walking through them 1,000 years later. Saadi too traveled widely, but the places in his narratives rarely come alive. I entered the desert of Quds, Saadi writes in Gulistan. In the mouth of Tripoli, I worked clay with the Jews, or writes, a night in Kish Island, yet no distinct image of Kish Island forms in our minds. The desert of Quds, these places exist only as names in Saadi compared to Nasser Khosrow. Around the narrative in structure in this novel, Hossein writes, in From Moon to Well, the city is a text. The author seeks a street that symbolizes the city, but in the process of walking through it, images arise, and streets and places become characters in the story. Ultimately, the author is searching for his lost identity. This extended story comprises self-contained micro-narratives ranging from realist scenes to surrealist peaks. These onion-like layers, though independent, collectively shape the main narrative. Occasional ruptures in the storytelling follow an inner organic logic, enabling readers to navigate and sequence the story in their own way. The street is one of modernity's most important achievements, continues Hossein to discuss the sociological understanding he has of the city. Unlike the alley, which belongs to an agrarian past, the city emerged with the automobile, with the rise of automobile. The first steam-powered car came to Iran in 1882 during the reign of Nasr ad-Din Shah. In 1900, the French company Renault gifted 2 cars to Muzaffar ad-Din Shah. By 1912, the first car entered Mashhad. Gradually, the concept of the modern street took root in Iran. With these developments, social life transitioned from the family home and alleyways during agricultural era to the street in contemporary modern era. Today, public life unfolds in streets and squares through shops, offices, malls, entertainment venues, cafes, and restaurants. The street has become the primary site of gathering and encounter. And to note what is in his mind, the relation between street as a character in the novel, the story's central character is the street itself, specifically one of Iran's most strategic streets, Tehran Street, later renamed Imam Reza Street, the route by which all who enter or exit Mashhad must pass. Constructed between 1930 and 1932, this street is less than a century old. In From Moon to Well, this street appears during a specific historical period, war, and is depicted in 2 contrasting moments. The story's core theme, the loss of human identity, arises from the instrumental, disrupted use of space. As the narrator walks alongside Fatabadi through these streets, reality and imagination intertwine. In The Blue Spring Street, another major novel that Hossein has written, we move from alley, a village agriculture, to street, to urban modernity, symbolizing urban modernity. In From Moon to Well, this new novel, we search for a lost identity in the street itself. Humans project identity onto places. That is how places become characters. But now, in the city I live in, Mashhad, observe what remains. It's as if someone follows us with an eraser, wiping away our footprints. This city was once home to Malik al-Shu'ara Bahar, famous Iranian constitutional poet and poet laureate of the time. It has witnessed countless historical, national, religious, and social events. Iran's second modern school was established here by Hassan Rushdie. A 4-story building, now long demolished, still lives on in public memory. Haydar Khan Mughlo, a communist constitutionalist, Colonel Muhammad Taghi Khan Pesian, Iraj Mirza, famous poet, Akhavan Saleh, contemporary poet, Ali Shariati, ideologue and theoretician, all lived here. In this story, as a contemporary man, search for my massacred, lost identity, an identity we cannot even reclaim in a cemetery. Hossein continues, this street also exists within another wartime context, and he is talking about the Iran-Iraq war during which the novel unfolds. While the story does not directly reference Abadan as one of the front lines of the external war or the Southwest, it evokes a violated land. The overt war happened there, but its shadow stretches here to the northeast. In this sense, Abadan and Mashhad are poles of the same nation, both engulfed in the uninvited war between tradition and modernity. If Abadan, Iran's first modern city, faced an overt war, Mashhad endures a covert one. Beneath the surface of the story, two wars unfold. The overt external war. The story's street plays a critical role in the external war. It appears under two names and in two distinct states. Tehran Street at the beginning and Imam Reza Street at the end. This street leading to the Imam Reza shrine is a vital artery into Mashhad. If you draw a line from Imam Reza Street in northeast to Khuzestan, Khorramshahr, and Abadan in southwest, you will find a narrative arc that starts and ends with a street, one that reflects two contrasting states of war. And finally, in his final note, Hossein writes, at the story's outset, Tehran Street, we witness warriors departing for the front, the war front, the first hemistash. Time passes before they return, the interval between the two hemistashes. During this period, we turn inward. Between these two poles of the external wall and internal wall, between these two poles of the external war, an internal war unfolds, a war between tradition and modernity, waged in shadow by agents, executioners, and femicide perpetrators. All symbols of modernity, street, squares, nature, trees, are gradually erased. Meanwhile, the overt war leaves behind devastation and historical trauma, a conflict that resists the promise of modernity. So this was the note by Hossein Atashparvar that I read to you, and he was speaking to it before we lost him, probably due to internet issues or energy outrage, which unfortunately these days it's quite common and many times unexpected within Iran. Moving to our next speaker today, I'm very much honored to introduce Dr. Ghanoonparvar. Professor Ghanoonparvar is Professor Emeritus of Persian and Comparative Literature at the University of Texas at Austin. Professor Ghanoonparvar has also taught at the University of Isfahan, University of Virginia, and the University of Arizona, and was a Rockefeller Fellow at the University of Michigan. He was the recipient of the 2008 Louis Roth Prize for Literary Translation and is the recipient of a Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Association of Teachers of Persian back in 2021. He is also the recipient of a Lifetime Achievement Award from Encyclopedia Iranica back in 2009 for his contributions to presenting Persian culinary arts to the non-Iranian public. Another magnificent area in which Professor Ghanoonparvar has contributed hugely. He has published widely on Persian literature and culture in both English and Persian, and is the author of, and I just read a few, Prophets of Doom, Literature as a Socio-Political Phenomena in Modern Iran back in 1984, Persian Cuisine, Traditional, Regional and Modern Foods, 2006, Iranian Film and Persian Fiction, 2016, Dining at the Safavid Court, 2016, and Iranian Cities in Persian Fiction, 2022. His most recent translations include Shahokh Mescoub's In the Alley of the Friend and Living, Staying, Returning. Houshang Golshiri's Book of Jinn, Jannameh, Moniru Ravanipur's The Drowned, and also These Crazy Nights. Ghazaleh Alizade's The Nights of Tehran, Two Views and Trial, as well as The House of the Idrisis. Ruhangiz Sharifian's The Last Dream, as well as Doran. Shahnoush Parsipur's Blue Logos. Hossein Atashparvar's From the Moon to the Well, Ahmad Kasravi's Superstitions, Reza Jolai's Jujube Blossoms, and Sadegh Hidayat's Neirangistan. His most recent book is Disease, Dying, Death, and Trauma in Persian Stories. Please join me in welcoming Professor Ghanoonparvar. We are all ears, as we say in Persian,
Thank you.
and look forward to your speech.
Let me start by saying that a translator usually chooses a book for several reasons. One of it is money. In our business, unfortunately, there's not much money to go around. So I have always, in the course of probably 50 years now, chosen the book that I want to share with our friends, English-speaking friends. That's the criteria. In other words, when I read the book and say, "Oh, I want to share that," that's the one I translate. And the translation of this book came about when I had mentioned earlier, I was writing a book about Iranian cities in Persian fiction, and had a tough time when I got to Mashhad. I chose basically the major cities. Tehran, Isfahan, Shiraz, Abadan was Mashhad, of course. For Tabriz, I couldn't find anything, by the way. I could not find even one story that would describe the city. Very hard to find. There are novels that things happen in Tabriz, but Tabriz doesn't become a character at all, in a way. And so I was looking for it and talking to different people about Mashhad, which I had the tough time. I had found a couple of short stories, and then somebody mentioned Atashparvar's Mahtacha, and that I said, okay. And I started reading it. I said, this is the book. Every city should have a book like this. This is exactly it. And what happened is that when in my own city, Isfahan, I had that experience in Janname Bagush and Golshiri. When in a very big novel, he basically is fluctuating between about 100 pages of it is in Abadan, and the rest of the book, 500 pages, is in Isfahan. And then there are long passages that describe in detail not only the city, but also his own relationship, the narrator's relationship with the city. Still, this book, in Mahtacha, From the Moon to the Well, this one really completely changed things for me. It even changed my vision of what I was writing in the book, Persian, Iranian cities in Persian fiction. It is not. It was in a way. Some parts of it were difficult to translate. Some parts were not. I have no problem with creating, let's say, a character like Fatabadi, create a language for that Fatabadi, because Fatabadi is an illiterate, basically, businessman who very low culture and speaks in a dialect and a different class of people. That's easy to do. I think the most difficult part of this book are when you come to very culture-specific things, which means what? Which means even at the beginning of the story, it starts with Ahangaran singing or things, religious thing. And I debated what to do with them. Eventually, I decided that the content was more important, even as important as everything else. And I kept almost a literal translation of those the mourning and the lamentations and all that they were doing. I also usually in most books that I translate, I provide an explanatory note at the end with all the culture specific things in it. In other words, if you say even talking about Imam Reza, I would have a paragraph about it. Or if you say something about, I don't know, Sizda Bedar, I have a paragraph about it. In this book, I completely avoided that. In a couple of places only, I gave a couple of footnotes. I think probably less than 10 footnotes in the book, describing when you talk about Kursangi and the structures that Atashparvar describes, some of these they were done by Germans. And when you look at the pictures, that's what you have. I tried to, what was missing also, but for any Persian speaker, and for me for sure, I had up to the age of 20 when I was in Iran, I probably visited the city, Mashhad, probably every other year, 10, 15 times. I had that picture of Mashhad in my head. And I understood completely what the novel is telling me, that Mashhad that I knew is lost, completely gone. My Esfahan is also completely gone. That's the same. It's the same idea, So another thing that was interesting in this novel, the names of the squares, for instance. Usually, one does not translate the names, proper names of things like Meydan Edam. You don't translate those. You just keep it Edam Square, right? But in this book, I couldn't do that, because the Edam Square is an executioner. It's got an executioner in it, and it's going to, it's going to execute some another square, all of that. So I tried as much as possible to keep that. And I think now that I have my distance from the translation for several years now, I'm happy with that. That was the right decision. I mean, the other choice would be to put footnotes for it, right? But that wouldn't do it, because as the readers going through it, if you say, okay, Edam is execution, and 10, 20 pages later you have Edam Square again, the reader is not going to remember what the meaning was, That's because it's the, alien language. I think that this book has a very special place, as Mehrak was saying also, a very special place in modern Persian fiction. There's no question about it. I think it is opening the eyes of a lot of writers to understand the place where they live, and how not only they give character to the city or to their village, but the village gives character to them. In other words, it is their identity, as Atashparvar says, and that's an important part of it. Anyway, I leave the rest of it for. I wanted to leave a little bit time for Dr. Kamali, because I remember in one of the emails he wanted to talk a little bit more. And if there's anything else there, I'll talk.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ghanoonparvar, for this note. I also have the same feeling, and that this is quite a different novel, and something very, very much needed in contemporary Persian literature, in the sense of both a deep reflection on what is happening in all these spaces and the identity of cities that in different ways have been, changed or completely rebranded and are going into several process of renaming, rebranding, as well as a lot of what we might call kind of a form of governmentality which happens through space. I also personally, coming from a Kerman background, I've seen how the city I was born to, even a few decades later, is no more there. The city has gone through a lot of transformations, rebrandings, and this process also, I can see how it affecting history, my own identity as someone related to that land and its people, and the way future generations will probably remember this city and what has gone through, what it has gone through.
Yes.
Having said that, let me briefly also introduce our next speaker. We are also honored that Professor Mehrak Kamali is here with us. Dr. Mehrak Kamali is a Persianist teaching Persian language and studying modern Persian literature and modern history of Iran. He has served as the Persian Language Program Director in the Department of Near Eastern and South Asian Languages and Cultures at Ohio State University since 2014. He has published several articles about modern Persian literature and the history of Iran in Persian. As a translator, he has translated Kamran Talatof's book, Politics of Writing in Iran, A History of Modern Persian Literature into Persian, published by Namak Publishers back in 2016. As an author, he has published a book entitled Sociological Essays about Today's Persian Fiction, also published in Persian in 2020. And Mehrak has been the reviewer of this book, published in Melanotes in a few months ago. Mehrak Jan, we are all ears, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, hello everyone. And thank you for so much for being here with us. We are talking about very serious issues about the novel, but I want to talk to say that it is the sense of humor and the satirical aspect of the novel as also is so important. And I will not talking about that, but it is very important part of that. It makes it unique again. We don't have, not we don't have, it is rarely we have the novels that has this kind of sense of humor. I don't know, that's something like that. I will share with you my PowerPoint slides and one second. Start to talk about. I tried to talk about different aspects of the novel. I know that both Mr. Atashparvar and Professor Ghanoonparvar, they were talking about Mashhad. I will talk about Mashhad as also, but I will talk about the other aspects of the novel too. It's the here. It is very brief review or overview of the novel here. In Mahtacha, or From the Moon to the World, Hossein Atashparvar transforms the city of Mashhad into a dynamic character whose shifting presence forms the novel's central inquiry. Told through a fluid cinematic lens and narrative abundance linear progression in favor of spatial dislocation, reflecting the fragmentation of both city and self. Atashparvar's grounded prose underscores the emotional turbulence of urban life, even as the narrator's voice remains statistically stable. The novel's journey through key streets in Mashhad becomes a deeper mediation of cultural amnesia and the dissolution of symbolic meaning. Through a Foucauldian critique of spatial power, the story examines how cities encode both control and resistance in their changing forms. At the heart of the text lies a profound sense of nakhanegi or unhousedness, an existential estrangement from one's own city, born not of exile, but of transformation. Atashparvar casts modernity not as progress, but as rupture, exposing how state-driven modernization undermines indigenous identity. Yet, amid this disorder, the novel resists symbol dichotomies, revealing instead how the city's identity evolves through adaptation and hybridization. Drawing on and deriving from Persian literary traditions, Mahtacha aligns itself with global modernist texts that read the city as a site of memory and loss. Yeah, starting with the main issue, main theme of the novel. In From the Moon to the Well, the city of Mashhad is not just a setting, but a central, almost living character. Atashparvar portrays the city as a dynamic text with its streets, places, and memories shaping the narrator's identity and the story itself. The narrator searches for a street that symbolizes their lost identity and the city's essence, but their journey reveals a strange, unfamiliar world promoting reflection on past and present. The portrayal makes Mashhad both a protagonist and an antagonist of the novel. Here I want to read a part of the translation of the novel here that as an evidence of this part. I remember each, it is about the Mashhad, it is that a copy of the Mashhad of 50 years ago will die with the diminishing of my eyes, in the same way that the copy of the Mashhad of 70 years ago has died with my father, and I no longer can envision the Mashhad coming from his mouth. And I buried the Mashhad of 1990 years ago with my grandfather in this farm. I remember each and every one of its shops, caravanserais and alleyways and back alleys from my childhood as two. For example, where a kebab shop was on Sevom Esfand Square, and what the tables and the people who were in a tea house that no longer exists looked like, or were on water roundabout, a charcoal shop was from which I always bought crushed charcoal for winter, or where on Haji Ibrahim Alaway's the barber shop and cooked sheep head shop were. and the other things that we have the same things about Mashhad at the following of this part. The other part of that, I want to talk about is about the narrative structure and the style. That is about the novel. The narrative structure is distinctly modernist in its spatial orientation and cinematic in style. The reader moves through the novel as if following a camera mounted on the narrator's shoulder, creating continuity of space but fragmentation of meaning. There is no narrative, there is no linear plot or conventional climax. Rather, there is a spatial montage and a wandering that reflects the narrator's psychological dislocation. Each street becomes a frame, each movement a mediation on what has been lost and erased. The city is experienced not through historical chronology, but through topographic disorientation. This approach aligns with post-structuralist theories of representation, emphasizing surface-level focalization over psychic interiority. The methodology reflects Henri Lefauré's concept of lived space, where the city exists in motion, perception, and advancement moment of interaction rather than in stationary rumination. Again, as a part of the example, I want to read a part of that. This is the page 4 and 5 of the novel. The scent of rosewater, the sound of religious salutation to the prophet and his family, the smoke and crackling sound of wild rope. You see that there is no word in here. The deep resonating voice of Haj Sadiq Ahangaran. Anyone desiring pilgrimage to Karbala, come. Anyone who wants to be our companion, come. Mothers are crying tears of blood. Each of them is crying alone and pays no attention to anyone else. There is no room even to drop a needle on the sidewalk. Mostly there are mothers. You cannot drop you cannot drop a needle on the street. People are packed close together like millets. Occasionally, they shift in place calmly, from electricity roundabout to the shrine. Every day, they are running on the street from 8 o'clock in the morning to 2 or 2:30. The sidewalks are standing still, watching them and crying tears of blood for them. The prayers and the crying of mothers see off the runners on the street. The caravan is destined for Karbala. Here I want to go to the language and voice in the novel. Language in Mahtacha plays a paradoxical role. It is firm and controlled without being ornamental, yet conveys the emotional and psychological instability of the narrator. Critics have noted that the novel avoids the fragmented language typical of contemporary fiction, instead adopting a deliberate, unwavering tone. This narrative stability, contrasting with the instability of urban identity, becomes a rhetorical strategy, a way of resisting the this integration of meaning through the constancy of voice. The novel employs evocative imagery with expression like overflowing, roaring, killing, and executing that suggest a delusional understanding of space as unstable and, in contrast, states of becoming through violence and upheaval. The novel unfolds along the arteries of Mashhad, means Tehran Street, Kuhsangi, Imam Reza Avenue, and Edam Square. But this is not merely a geographical journey. It is an ontological exploration of a city that has lost its identity, memory, and symbolic meaning. The city, as theorized by Michael de Soto as spatial dynamics and Henry Lefort as lived space, refuses to be held fast to static conceptual or physical containment. Mashhad is presented as a text to be interpreted and lived through, rather than merely observed. The shrine of Imam Reza, with its spiritual gravity, and Tehran Street, teeming with life, serve as pivotal icons of continuity and change. The novel opens with the image of a rural local being digested within Mashhad, and an unsettling metaphor for how urban expansion swallowed, raises, and assimilate older, meaningful spaces. In page 20, I want to read this part also as an example of this part. That is, it is thought that the title is Execution Square Electricity Roundabout. It is the name of the square changed from execution, it means Edam, to Barq, electricity. In the midst of the astonishment of the passerby who were attempting to cross Tehran Street, which later became Imam Reza Street, Zed Street, Nakhrisi Street, and Bahar Street around electricity roundabout, the people of Mashhad, one Saturday morning at 8:15 had seen the electricity roundabout was being yanked out of its place with a crane, shaken to get rid of the dust and dirt, then placed on a trailer. And with two Rio military trucks full of soldiers escorting it, one in front and one in the back, it was sent to Execution Square. Around the flower beds of electricity roundabout was crowded. People were following the Rio military trucks and the trailer in their bare feet. As they were moving, electricity roundabout could not fit on Tehran Street and would get caught on doors and walls. They ordered electric saws to be brought and cut the parts that were too big. Each time that they cut a part of electricity roundabout, the sounds of ouch from the people of Mashhad would deepen, and airs of heavens and great the hearts of the crowd. When water roundabout and other flower beds saw this situation, they pissed on themselves in fear, and one could see their piss drops on the streets. After 4 hours and 25 minutes of local time, under protection and with prayers and salutations in the midst of wild raw smoke, sprinkles of salt, and the commotion of the people, the trailer that was carrying electricity roundabout with 2 Rio military trucks escorting it entered execution square safe and sound. As they see that how they change everything in this part, they erase them, execute the symbols of the city. From a faculty and discourse analysis perspective, the story examines how people resist a fast-changing social and cultural landscape to power. Cities are the cities are repositories of power, memory, struggle, hope, and disappointment. Mashhad functions as a microcosm of wider societal dynamics, illustrating the complexity of power relationships and the tension between past and present. In page 18, we can see part of that. Mehdi told me if it is too long to go this kind of things, but
you still have around. It would be great if you can wrap it up in 8 minutes, 9
Oh, very
minutes.
good. Yes, yeah. I'm reading this part because I think that it is important to know that how the writer have this kind of things in his novel. The shrine is completely within view. We arrive under the passageway. How this place has changed. As far back as I can remember, from the time when I used to grab the edge of my mother's chador, so that I would not get lost in the shrine, they have constantly been digging around the shrine. As far back as I can remember, around the shrine and in its courtyard, masons, stone cutters, and tile workers have been working. During the past 40 years that I know of, there has always been some scaffolding around the shrine. I used to grab the edge of my mother's chador. We mostly enter through the courtyard of Goharshad Mosque, which has approximately across from Tehran Street. We rarely enter the shrine from the lower or upper sanctuary, reflecting pools, jetting fountains, pigeons, wheat, Ismail Talai drinking fountain, and the steel window until we reached Goharshad Mosque, the bazaar, and the shrine, where the whispers and prayers would never get lost in the din. Silent tears, short sobs, golden light, and the glimmering of thousands of mirrors. The scent of mosque, umbrages, and rose water. Here is about how the sense of a very young person. The term or the theme of unhousedness, central to the novel is the concept of unhousedness or nakhanegi, extending psychological displacement beyond physical relocation into feeling of alienation within one's own city. The narrator exists as an exile searching for familiar signs in a city he no longer recognizes. He is not traditional exile. He still walks the streets of his city, but existential estrangement due to the transformation of space itself. The city no longer reflects his memory or identity. This sense of estrangement is intensified by what Atashparvar describes as an execution of urban symbols, a deliberation erasure of memory rather than accidental forgetting. The destruction and replacement of urban symbols creates a detachment that negotiates between tradition and modernity as characters' identities shift in response to tension between rooted culture and rapid social evolution. The novel presents a critique of modernism in Iran as not a gradual cultural evolution, but as an imported, state-driven, militarized phenomenon. This results in a schizophrenic urban identity, one that wears an architecture of modernity but lacks the cultural infrastructure to support it. The contradiction between modern appearances and traditional content leads to the disintegration of collective and individual identity. Atashparvar's metaphor of urban growth as a misshapen balloon encapsulated the non-linear, chaotic nature of modernization, stretching traditional life in unforeseen ways. Modernity does not erase the past, but compels tradition to feed and survive within new urban relations. But personifying historical landmarks such as the Great Wall of China and Pyramid of Egypt, memorial aspects become sites of symbolic violence against collective memory and cultural identity through their elimination. This one, I want to have an example of this. No, it is, I think it's too long. Yes. Yeah, that's fine. And go to the next one. Without framing urban transformation as a binary between resistance and oppression, the novel explores cultural hybridity and adaptation. Religious practices coexist within modern aspirations, remodeling forms of family and culture. Threads of resistance are woven within the tapestry of changing city life through personal struggles for retrieving private histories amidst broader changes. The underlying philosophical question concerns how one carries history and identity in a world of continuous change. What remains of the self when everything else has shifted? This question provides both structural and thematic support for the novel while confronting readers with what constitutes human identity amidst change and uncertainty. Here I want to talk about a little bit about the comparison between this novel and the other novels in Persian and the other languages about cities. When placed within Persian literature translation, Mahtacha represents a turning point in urban fiction. Earlier works such as Murtaza Mushfiq Kazemi's Tehran Makhuf presented the city as morally corrupt space needing reform, linear, didactic narratives where the city symbolized traditional social failure. In contrast, Atashparvar city is not corrupt, but lost. It needs not reform, but memory. Similarly, Ahmad Mahmoud's novel, especially Hamsayaha, the neighbors, present the city as a site of class struggle and political awakening. Mahmoud's Ahwaz is filled with resistance, protest, and social agency, while Atashparvar's Mashhad is devoid of agency, a ghost of itself where the narrator can only witness, not intervene. Mahtacha aligns more closely with global urban modernist and postmodernist works in regards James Joyce Ulysses in focusing on the city as a living text to be read through walking, through do while Joyce celebrates Dublin's complexity. Excuse me, I want to see that, to read it again. It records James Joyce Ulysses in focusing on the city as a living text to be read through walking, through do while Joyce celebrates Dublin's complexity. Atashparvar mourns Mashhad's eraser. The work echoes Tejo Cole Open City, where a narrator walks through New York as a flaneur, reflecting on trauma and memory. A meaningful comparison exists with Orhan Pamuk's Istanbul, Memories on the City, where the concept of Hossein, that means melancholy, defines the emotional tone of a city caught between imperial memory and modern transformation, while Pamuk laments the loss of grandeur, Atashparvar grieves the loss of meaning. His melancholy concerns not faded empires, but a city that has amputated its symbolic past. From the Moon to the Well demonstrates an ambiguous understanding of social change, where people and urban icons create both meaning and disappointment as they face uncertainty to the urban transformation. The experience of transformation is not linear development, but a continuous process of reinvention. Interwoven with the story of developing living Mashhad, Atashparvar reflects upon social dynamics where individual lives intersect in small spaces. The novel transcended its pages to become an important introspection of change, unchanged memory, and human adaptation. The Imam Reza Shrine and Edam Square stand as powerful symbols of adaptation and remembrance in Mashhad's urban landscape, embodying the weight of memory while demonstrating the inevitability of change. Each transformation tells stories of displacement, loss, resilience, and the continuous adaptation process experienced by the city's inhabitants and places. Mahtacha is a novel of estrangement, not only from the city, but from language, history, and itself. It poses an urgent question for both literature and urban studies. What happens when space forgets? Rather than documentation, urban life in realist details or allegorizing it from ideological critique, it performs a phenomenological inquiry into what it means to live in a place that no longer recognizes you and that you no longer recognize. It transforms urban space into existential terrain where each step negotiates between memory and absence, between belonging and loss. Atashparvar does not offer resolution. He offers a walk through vanished alleys, executed symbols, and haunted present of a city that once was home. Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry for long.
No, I really enjoyed it. Thanks, Mehrak John, for the presentation and all the notes and that reflections and interpretations you had. It, when we talk about the importance of this novel and how it helps us actually reflect on all the ways that this spatial governmentality and all the ways that erasure of identity through constant transformations in cities that we were born in. We have memories of all the ways that they have affected us in personal levels. This is a very, very, very important way that literature can help understanding even your own history and diaries and memories. And I also want to acknowledge what you mentioned in the sense that while this novel does all this quite serious and helps with all this quite serious reflections, it has and Atashparvar in general has a kind of astonishing sense of humor, a form of a grotesque humor, satire in a sense that that blends. He has this method of blending literary experimentalism, a lot of formalistic and technical maneuvering within his narrative, while constantly also evoking satire. You cannot just resist at some laughing at the strange ways that the government is violating the histories and how it all is being seen and experienced to the as we walk along with the characters. I can go on and on just talking about Hossein, and he's also a legend. He's very much a huge person in the sense of assisting other new authors, new generation of fiction writers to claim their voice. He has been instrumental in helping to move beyond the usual hierarchies of literary production in Iran. He has been quite supportive, and this I can attest that as someone who has been who has had the chance to be in touch with him in the last couple of years without even seeing each other once, but just constantly through digital methods, all the ways that he has such an intellectual and literary generosity to help with new voices, literary voices, and experimental authors be seen and claim their voices. So I want to acknowledge that as well. And in the audience, I can see Ali Rahmani, PhD candidate at Uppsala University, is also with us. Ali has written an extensive article on this novel. So in case and published in Bang magazine, in case Ali Jan, you'd like to speak a little bit about your reflections on the novel, please do so if you're interested. Otherwise, yes, I think Ali Jan, looking forward to hearing from you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mahdi Jan, and all the professors and then Asatid for letting me share my ideas here. I would, as you mentioned, I have written recently a very brief article published on the Persian literary platform Bang, and I'm hoping to make it turn it into a more extensive article in English. So I would really appreciate your insights either during this session or after that, so I can improve it. So in the article, I have highlighted a striking analogy between the transformation of urban environment that the novel portrays and the structure of the narrative itself. Mashhad, a city that I have born and raised in, as we know, is a city whose municipal management operates as part of a large totalitarian state. It relies on vast revenues from the holy shrine of Imam Reza, and during the last 3 or 4 decades, it has spent huge amounts of money of this revenue for many different top-down uneven development projects. And of course, it has demolished so many of the urban landscapes that once had some meaning, some symbolic significance to the population through generations. So this social context is reflected in the novel allegorically. As we read the novel, we see a totalitarian force that executes city squares, charging them for blocking the streets and replacing them with more practical junctions. If we draw on Henry Lefebvre's theory of production of space, we can see that this totalitarian force perpetually occupies and demolishes lived space as a space which involves collective identity, symbolic meaning, urban, artistic creation, and so, and replaces it with functional spaces, material, practical, or commodified aspects of this space. Looking at the narrative itself, it actually shares a remarkable analogy with its context, because there too we can see that it's so in a city that has lost all its symbolic urban landmarks, the protagonist struggles to find a setting for this story. And interestingly, he consults a real estate agent to help him find a location for the story. Then, to publish the book, he goes to the municipality instead of Ershad. And later, the municipality revokes the permit and decrees that the story's structure or building must be destroyed. So here too, in the narrative itself, the physical, the material, and the practical aspects of life or the space consumes the symbolic, the abstract, and the imaginary, and the emotional. It replaces it. And we reach to a point when the narrator or author himself feels threatened, on the verge of being replaced by the real estate agent. What we witness is that both in the narrative itself and in its urban setting, the conceived and functional space overwhelms lived representational space. It is the lived space that should resist the totalitarian force and the dominant narratives. And now, in the absence of this lived space, this symbolic and representational space, that's why we notice that the story is so steeped in horrifying, threatening examples of violence and oppression. Serial killer, executioner, the city newspaper with a central office resembling a military headquarters, and so. To sum up, the novel has three astonishing aspects that I personally would like to see more often in contemporary Persian fiction. First, it is deeply political without falling prey to sloganism. Second, it laments the loss of an urban landscape and collective identity without lapsing back to nostalgia. And third, is that it does not merely conform to the mimetic conventions of representing urban spaces, as we see in Western realistic novels. Instead, it questions the very possibility of representation in a context where representational space is already occupied by a dominant ideology intent to erasing collective memory. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Alijan, for this summary of your reading and interpretation of the work. It's unbelievable that we already are around 4:40. This is probably one reason when we speak about good literature, time just flies. Hossein Can, I want before wrapping up the session and final words from each of the presenters to also hear a few words from you. I know that your talk was just it was seized because of the internet problem probably. So if you just want to say a few sentences and then as final remarks, that would be great. حسین جان به شما گوش میدیم چند دقیقه چون صحبتتون قطع شد. اگر دوست دارین در چند دقیقه چون متاسفانه زمان اونم خیلی محدوده صحبت پایانی داشته باشین بفرمایید.
نه بسیار خوشحالم که این جلسه برگزار شد. شما زحمت کشیدین، تک تک شما و گفتنیار شما گفتین. منم دیگه فکر نمی کنم که دیگه چیزی یادی باشه که بخوام بگم.
Okay. Thanks, Hossein Can. Hossein Can just thanked all of the people in the room, and he also shared that he had enjoyed listening to all of us. So, Dr. Ghanoonparvar, please, if you have any final remarks, yes.
I just wanted to add that, for an English-speaking reader, you have to have something more tangible, and for that reason, with consulting with, of course, with Mr. Atashparvar, I added some pictures, which most of them were supplied by him, by the way, in several files. So that was the added thing. I tried to fit it in there to get some visual to reader, what are we talking about, Anyway, so thank you, everybody. And thank you, Dr. Kanjavi, for organizing this.
I also personally really congratulate you, acknowledge your role. You have been such a prominent figure in introducing the modern, experimental, avant-garde Persian fiction to the English world, and doing all this as in such a as a with such a dedicated and care is quite rare. It's a we just I just want to acknowledge you are a cultural gem that we have, and we are very much grateful that you, with such a dedication, you have introduced all these fabulous novels to I'm pretty sure translating Hossein's novel had not been an easy task. It is a quite challenging work, and with the limited exposure that many times Persian fiction in translation has in global literary markets, it's a work of love, care, and someone with a lot of vision for where the location of Persian literature should be in global literature. So I personally, as a scholar, as a someone in love of Persian fiction, Persian modern fiction, I really acknowledge that, and I'm grateful for all that you are doing and have done there. It's unbelievable in a sense what you have achieved.
We are also very grateful for all of you in Canada. This is the second session we have had about this novel from Canada. Nothing in the States yet.
This part in the States, though. I'm located in San Diego, so
yeah.
Yeah.
Farshad is a huge force behind this. Farshad, I wanted to acknowledge Farshad as the editor-in-chief of Melanotes, and we both, as part of the editorial board, have received the support from the executive board of Mela to initiate this new book series. And the aim has been actually to help the fostering these kind of dialogues between those who are contributing hugely to our understanding of contemporary and modern Middle East. And we are very much, I think, both of us proud that we have started this new series with on this novel with Professor Atashparvar, as well as Mehrak Kamali, who is a quintessential figure when it comes to someone constantly reflecting and writing on modern contemporary Persian fiction. There are not that many critics who who actively read and write about many of the contemporary authors without the usual economics of literature, or whatever you might call it, or how you want to describe it. Having said that, Mehrak Can, if you also want to share a few words as your final remarks.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Just I want to say that we talked about everything, many aspects of the novel, and make it maybe sometimes make it clear, sometimes make it more complicated. But I want to say that the literariness and fiction character of the literature of the novel, I think, is the most important part of that. That it is not our interpretations of that. It is all of them are the second part. The first thing about a novel, about the fiction, is about its literariness. حسین جان دارم میگم که مهمترین قسمت داستان بودنشه و ما هر چی روش میذاریم، تفسیرهایی که میذاریم، خب هم شاید آسونتر بکنه، شاید هم سختتر بکنه داستان رو، ولی مهمترینش که داستان خوب، داستان درستی نوشته شده. اینجاست که
قربان
ما خیلی
شما،
متشکریم از شما.
لطف دارین شما، خیلی خیلی لطف دارین و دیگه من شرمنده هم دیگه. قربان
خواهش
شما
می‌کنم.
آقای قانونپرور، خیلی واقعا لطف کردن، زنده کردن این کار در مجموع، از زبان فارسی عبورش دادن. همونطور مهدی جان که یعنی یکی از نیکترین، جدا از اینکه نویسنده خلاقی هست، مهدی من سالیان سال کارش تعقیب میکنم، نوآوری داره در فرم، در همه چی، و سالیان جدا از اینا انسان بسیار بسیار شریفی هست، یکی از بهترین هایی که من دیدم چیز هست. و شما خودت مهرک جان، آقای رحمانی هم جدا، علی هم به شکل دیگه، نوع دیگه که افتخار میکنم، افتخار ما هستن همه شما و خیلی لطف کردین. در حقیقت ما رو دارین نجات میدین از زبان فارسی و دارین چیز میکنین. بسیار بسیار
Thank you
خیلی خیلی
all.
خوشحالم، خیلی لطف کردین، خیلی خوب بود، خیلی خوب بود.
Thanks.
حالا نظر شما تا چی باشه؟
ممنونم حسین جان. If just Farshad John, do you want to say anything before we end the session, or ending at least the recording of the session? We might, if we want, we can stay after the recording and continue conversation for a couple of minutes.
Sure. I'm stopping the record session. It will be posted on our YouTube channel later this week. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.